What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? Mr. Rad here. Welcome to today's video. The last video y'all saw we were driving this thing, and now the 4-rotor RX-7 is back up on jack stands right at home for most RX-7s in the world, but we're not going to keep it there. So the reason this thing is up on jack stands is because, well, I have a oil leak that is coming from an unknown location. And one of the things, when you're building these here rotary engines, just like regular piston engines, is if your rear main seal is leaking. I've pulled many an oil pan off only for it to be a rear main seal leak. And on a rotary, don't just check the rear main seal. There's also an O-ring on your stationary gear on the back of the engine, so I'm going to be making sure that that O-ring is in there, because let me tell you, it's very easy to forget to change it, or to even just forget to install that O-ring when you're putting an engine together to go into your car. So when I got this engine, it already had a rear counterweight on it, which meant that I assumed there would have been a brand new rear main seal and a O-ring on the stationary gear, which would have been behind the rear counterweight. So I didn't check it. I probably should have checked it while this was apart. And now my oil leak, to which I've pulled the pan back off and put the pan back on 2 times, hopefully, is just as simple as I can now drop the transmission out and we can look. So let's look under the car. I'm going to show you one of the telltale signs of a rear main leak. It's pretty easy to figure out, actually, but sometimes you just don't want to deal with the effort. So aside from the oily mess down here, to which I have been wiping up nearly every time I drive this, if this was simply an oil pan leak, we'd be seeing oil coming out between the oil pan and the block, right? But on an FD RX-7 OEM transmission, they have a pole style clutch, so they have this little cover right here that goes on the transmission. Now, if you see oil start coming out of this cover, most likely it's coming from above the oil pan. Another way to check is if you pull your starter off and look up in here past the ring gear, you're going to see an area where oil has been slung out from behind the flywheel onto the bell housing, and we definitely have that. So typically it's like a clean section where the oil has wiped away all the dirt, which is what's happening. In addition, you'll see some oil come out of this little pinhole right here, which is effectively like your bell housing drain. If you drive your RX-7 through a river of water, the bell housing and clutch will stay dry, the water will drain out right here. So I've got to drop this transmission, which fortunately, aside from being oily, has been out of the car recently, so we'll just drop it right out. It only sucks though is that this is an FD RX-7, which means that I've got to take the power plant frame, the drive shaft, some of the exhaust, and a whole bunch of stuff out to get this out, versus on an old first gen, all I would do is pop the drive shaft out, this thing would come right out, and I wouldn't have to deal with the rear differential. First try on the clutch popper. I should have turned on less stressful music for this. I feel like I'm removing a transmission in a haunted house. I don't think an oil pan oil leak would be up that high. My guess is though, with how much oil is coming from behind it, I bet it doesn't have an O-ring. Leaking, unfortunately. Beautiful XZ twin disc clutch back here though. The other thing that's inconvenient is that this nut is smaller than 2 1/8, and I don't know if I have a socket that fits that offhand. The most stressful part of this whole deal is getting back in here. Okay, well there's a line on there. We know the blue thing is basically completely down, and I can look at the footage to make sure I put it back on right. So let's just go ahead and keep this off for now. And let me look. So there's definitely some RTV on the back side of this nut. I wonder if it's not leaking oil. Like, I wonder if it's leaking oil through these splines, and that's coming out the back of that nut area, because I've got a bunch of oil, and there's a bunch of oil residue all over this clutch and flywheel setup, but not so much oil on the back of this. There's more oil on the front of it than on the back. This doesn't look like it's a rear main seal leak. It looks like it's just pushing oil out of that counterweight versus pushing oil around the rear main. Huh. Okay, well now my only worry is just making sure that I get this back on in the right exact keyway that I took it off without obviously me making the mistake of not marking it. So there's a line, the line was at the top, it looked like the blue line was at the bottom, so I'm going to consult the footage to know exactly where the blue line on the flywheel was whenever I slid it off, such that I can put this on in the exact right spot, assuming that it will go on multiple directions. I don't see like a fat or a missing keyway on here. Definitely, while we're here, I think I'm still going to push a new rear main seal in, an OEM one, and I think I'm going to, I don't have to pull the stationary gear all the way out, but I'm at least going to slide it back a little bit just so I can see up in there to make sure that there's an O-ring in it, and then put it back in. Because I'm not taking this transmission out again, so I really want to make sure to address every single thing that could be leaking back here. But with this having silicone on it and literally oil running down the face of the flywheel, I bet this is probably the issue, not so much that rear main or the fact that there is or isn't a stationary gear O-ring. Alright guys, normally on a 2-rotor engine I would not be this worried about this, but this still scares me because, well, it's a 4-rotor, I've never taken this apart before. Now, I slid this stationary gear, this is the one out of the motor. I slid it back in, slid it back, slid it back in, slid it back, till it like came all the way out, slid it back in. So I'm not gonna breathe on it. This should go back in there. It's got an O-ring in it, which, you know, I didn't doubt that it did, but I wanted to get in here and make sure because people have forgotten this before. Not me, not Logan, but people have. In engines, they leak oil. This also had a bead of silicone around the outside of it, to which I'm going to re-bead of silicone the outside of it before I put it back in. I also noticed that there is a dot on the E-shaft that, based on my camera footage, lines up where the score mark was on the counterweight. So I was going to say, whoever, you know, you're going to machine that stuff, you're going to have to take apart and put it back together. You're going to want to mark that somehow so you know how to put it back together. We got that sorted. So now I just got to clean up this oil, wipe some stuff off with some brake cleaner, fresh bead of silicone on here. We have a fresh OEM rear main seal ready to go in. No more leaks. That's what I want. 0 leaks. We want all the oil leaks gone. Alright, moment of truth. New seal. New O-ring. We've got a new groove of silicone on there. This should go back on. Exactly how it came out. Come on. Hey yo, that's a win. Okay, now that that's in there, we can rest easy. Let's just put these bolts in here really quick so this can't turn, you know, after it's already stabbed, it'll be in here. We're good to go. Huge win. Major stress relief lifted. Now I just gotta figure out a way to seal these splines up, which is gonna be a whole nother animal, I think. This will probably be very hard for you guys to see, but you can see this line right here. Based on my video and seeing this dot in the end of the E-shaft, the dot and the line have to be lined up. There's no other identifying marks other than that dot and this line, based on where this was when I took it off. So that's where it's gonna go. Has to be the right spot.
You know, sliding in here, working around, trying to dunk on him. This is this. They start to become kids when we become baby kids. Certain amount of money from them, you know, like she's like there's a thing that
All buttoned up and ready to fire this thing up. Let it run. Make sure we don't have any oil leaks. Now that the transmission, everything's back in, we got the exhaust on, and I didn't put the straight pipe on it because I want to retain my hearing. We'll let Johnny hear that for the first time. When we get down to Tennessee, I'll swap it on the trailer or something when he sees this thing for the first time. But let's fire this deal up. Y'all know what that means if the yellow car is coming in here. Now it's time to go take this thing for a little test drive and make sure everything's good to go. We'll see how everything goes. Waking up the entire county driving this thing, but that's okay. It would really be dope if it had a turbo though, because that would be, it would sound a little quieter. And I think with these like long tube headers, you get a very interesting tone, which is why this one sounds a lot different than other 4 rotors on the interwebs. I don't know, they all kind of sound unique. Like I went back and listened to a bunch of Mad Mike's videos the other night, because he pretty much has straight pipes on all of his stuff too. Still breaking up. Either that or I missed a spot on the rev limiter to get it unset from 5,000. But searching through all the functions in the Haltech, like you can search it, so at least I can see all of that, versus like the Fuel Tech, there's only one spot to necessarily change the rev limiter unless you set other things up. And this Haltech is like, I am 100% not a tuner. I've said that a bajillion times. This is really my like 2nd or 3rd experience ever plugging into a Haltech and doing what's, like seeing what's going on. I understand what things mean, obviously, building cars and wiring and everything like that. But I don't understand all of the, like every single part that goes on in this ECU. Like I still have to, you know, learn that, right? So, which I made very clear to Johnny that like, hey, we need to get this to somebody who can tune it before we actually go like really probably any further than I'm trying to go right now. Everything's looking good right up to where it starts to break up. I really think it's just a rev limiter setting, but right at 5,000. It's got to be a setting in here. Well, everything feels good to 5,000 though, so I think honestly it's probably good because I have the most time spent base mapping and scaling and doing stuff up to 5,000, so I think I'm gonna go and change the one spot where I know the rev limiter setting that I changed to try to get it to 6,000 is, and then from there we'll leave it like that so that Johnny can drive it around. We'll get some more break-in miles on it, and then we'll come back in a couple weeks and open this thing up, and we'll get it out to Ernie, who is Haltech certified tuner, get it on the dyno and get this thing actually right before we break something doing something dumb, even though, you know, still trying to just learn this stuff. But there comes a time where it gets out of my hands, out of Johnny's knowledge, out of, you know, take it to somebody who's very competent versus us trying to push the limits of what we know and breaking something. Alright, so with that guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. This car, as much as it's a simple NA rotary engine Haltech ECU and an FDRX7, which should be super easy and easy to figure out, there's always stuff that's going to be tripping you up when you're doing a new build, putting something together for the first time, even just if it's parts you know should work together. So I'm excited to hopefully have the oil leak fixed up. We'll know when we get back. We reduced it by fixing the leak behind the stack gear. I still think that drain plug was leaking, so we changed that. It wasn't leaking before I left in the shop, and it's just sitting there. But obviously I haven't like driven it, because now we've driven it. So we'll look at it, and I'll update you guys at the end of the video. But with that, that's going to be the end of today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Yeah, it's staying right at 5,000. There's still got to be a setting in this. RPM limiter correction, main limiter, ignition. Same thing. It's hot, Don. That's the end of the end of the end of the video. Decided I didn't want to end the video sweating in the car. I'm going to show you guys a few things. So if you're not a member of the Patreon, you don't get to know what's under this cover just yet. So there's some things around the shop you might recognize. Look closely. But this is going to be kind of changing a little bit of maybe a video style on building a car, where I'm going to try to do a whole bunch of stuff and put together like a better, more nicer video about it. So that's the engine, the trans, everything that goes in this car is getting documented on Patreon. Go check it out. In addition, I finally got my hybrid flange. So this following week, taking a little bit of a break, going on vacation, coming back, hanging out with my family and stuff. So when we get back from that, we're going to be cranking on building out the hybrid exhaust and tearing this car apart. I'd hoped to get it all tore apart before I left, but unfortunately, 4-rotor stuff caught up, dropped transmission, all sorts of stuff, which you guys saw in this video, which is pretty hectic. So in addition, I won't show it to you, but there's 2 project cars outside. And let's see, I'll edit it out if you can see it, but over here, the yellow car, and there's a car behind it. The Patreon members know about the car behind it, and they know the plan with the yellow car and the car behind it. So definitely go check out the Patreon. I'd be much appreciated for your guys' support over there as well. But with that, it's going to be the end of the video. Thank you guys always for watching the videos. It's huge. Love seeing your guys' comments. Love having your guys' support. Love learning from you as much as you guys learn from me. So with that, keep it rad. The official end of the video. We'll see you in the next one. Peace. I don't think I filmed the clip I would need to delete myself from the video after I said the word, but hybrid.